wil van jou, ik ga nu in mijn opnames eenmaal in Mose, laatst ik wordt het eerste twee brüder, al einer der andere zich afjansig wird, mir einer den anderen dood. En van der wil ik in Mose kapitel 5 gaan, door 5 vers lezen. En dan wil ik nog bij kapitel 6 gaan. Hier de eerste Mose, kapitel 5, vers 1, hier zegt het staat, dat erst de Bürg van Adam zijn nu komen, als God de mensen mögt hij die zo als God weer. Hier kan we zijn, God mögt de mens zoals hij. Viele Mal wir zijn mensen, die sind ans Fram. En we zullen niet een Spuß über das merken oder in dem bespaten oder irgendwas. Wir sollen immer diese Weise denken, Gott mögt den auch zoals hij. Der hat uns alle so gemerkt als hij. En we hebben dat in denken houden. We zijn special, aber we zijn eenmaal in zijn geval. Hier de tweede vers, en hij mögt Mondsmenschen en Frühmenschen en juist aan en zegenen. Hij heeft die gezien, dus hij gemerkt heeft, en blessed hij danach, zegen hij danach. So beautiful. Als hij die gemerkt had, nam hij aan mensen. En dat is voor ons noemen is, wat we op dit zijn, we zijn mensen. Hier de derde vers, als Adam 130 jaar oud was, had hij een zegen, die zou weer als Adam zelfs. En hij nam aan zet. De vierde vers, nu dem dat zet geboren werd, leefde Abraham 800 jaar en hij had nog andere kinderen. Abraham starf bij een alter van 930 jaar oud. En dan wordt het ver, maar ze denken dat nu deze deel, waar mens 100 jaar oud wordt, of dicht bij 100, dan is het al te zijn, dat is niet meer jong. En aber ich glaube, Gott hat die Zeit, die Mensch so viel stärker gemerkt, die so viel im Körper stärker gewesen. Da hat vielleicht 900 Jahre vielleicht so geloten, als nu Menschen 100 Jahre. Das wird eigentlich bestätigt merken, aber als ich gerade über denke, weiß ich nicht. Aber das wird ich denken, dass die Menschen die Zeit waren stärker sind gewesen. Wir wollten natürlich nach einer des nach aller geworden, dass hier der 20. Vers Gerard, aber der heute Gerard starb als hij 962 Jahre alt war. So da hat das also dich bei 1000 Jahre gemerkt. So interesting, wenn ich hier so kicken, wie alt die Menschen dann sind geworden, die Zeit. Und nu, weil ich hier wieder gehen in das erste Kapitel. Und Gott hat die Menschen gebläset und hat die reich gemerkt, gut gemerkt, das heute wohl. Und hier wieder das erste Kapitel, wo wir hier, dass die Menschen als Beis geworden, die sind nicht gut geblieben, die haben zu viel an Dingen getan, was sie nicht haben sollen, oder was sie nicht sollen. Dann hier der erste Vers, als die Menschen sich hier ab ihr vermehren und sie dachten haben. Nomen de Sehens van de Jetta so alles van mangt de Menschen als aan Schmack leiden und befrieden sich mit die. Mir hat sie dort erst mit Eva auch geworden, was sie bloß haben gepickt, ohne mir alles zu wollen nehmen, die wird einen Schmack leiden. Und hier der dritte Vers, und der Herr sagt, ich will den Mensch nicht ab einmal leben lassen, er erst doch Fleisch. Ich will am 120 Jahre leben lassen. Hier der vierte Vers, zu der Zeit in Ogluta werden wir nie verlieten, ab ihr, die du nu kommen werden, von den Sehens, von den Jetta und von den Frühmenschen, lang drei werden dort starke und hoch angesehene Männer. So wir hier noch, dass die starke, hoch angesehene Männer dann die Zeit sind, gewas, lang drei sagt das hier all. En hier de 5e vers. De Herr sagt dat de mens sei boys op ihr wieren. En dat gedanken bloß den tijd ever schlechte gedanken wieren. Ich glaube einmal hier, wenn wir hier und denken mit diesen schlechten Gedanken, da können wir selbst mit anschaffen, wenn wir uns Leuten schlecht ankommen, je stärker wir dort Leuten wasen, je stärker bleibt dort, was das an uns. Und ich glaube, da müssen wir mit schaffen, was wir nicht Leuten die schlechten Gedanken ankommen. Ich weiß, ein Zeit, mir das immer so, wenn ich mir lang auf einen Mensch geäuert habe, einmal dann kam mir das in die Gedanken her, dann bohrt mir das noch einmal. So hat ein Traktor, besonders, du war mit der Zeit lang fair, und ein war dann auch. Dann auf einmal kamen alle Sorten Gedanken von denen der Mensch, den würde ich mal sagen, so gleich schlecht, dass man da sich nicht Leuten ankommt. Ich habe vom Prediger gehört, der sagt, sie wohnen wie damals die Frauen drin. Im Vietnam den Schwarz. Da wir einmal die gute Frauen, was wir nicht die schlechten Gedanken fördern, weil wir die guten Gedanken, weil wir einmal denken, was Gott wirklich für uns getan hat. Das Leid, was wir nicht sagen, das Letzte, weil wir an dort Leid denken. Das ist so beautiful. Das erste Vers hier, in dem Herrn, der dort Leid, dort hat Menschen ab ihr gemerkt, haben wir dort so eine Schuld. Und wir eben schuld, was der Menschen erhofft gemerkt. Und hier der 7. Vers, und er sagt, ich war diese Menschen, was ich gemerkt habe, von ab ihr Utruden. Ich war Menschen und alle Tieren en veel uitroeden. Zo schuld als mij dit, dat ik aan gemerkt heb. Wat ze hier aan weer schuld wat de mensen gemerkt hebben, maar ik geloof aan weer het nachtelige schuld wat hij dat moest doen, wat hij moest doen. De mensen waren zo boos, hij moest bloß een merken. En waarom ze denken dat dat wat hij gemerkt heeft, wat hij verstond, dat de tieren, wie weten dat één tieren, hoen. De gaat wat te leren. Piet, wie had het gezegd? Ik heb een Piet, wenn ik de boven zingen daar en dan staat. Een Piet heeft eens wat te leren. Maar dat brengt een zeer grote effort te doen, wat dat Piet wat du kamp, wat dat de mens hart net, wat dat leren net. En zo zijn ook andere tieren. Dat niet dat verstand wat mens. Gott hat uns Menschen so viel Verstand gegeben, was wir so denken können. Aber sie nehmen das verarbeiten. Und hier der 8. Vers. Ich glaube, ich will was sehen. Und er sagt, ich war diese Menschen, was ich gemerkt habe, oh ja, das habe ich all gelesen, ich war da noch einmal. Was ich gemerkt habe, von ab ihr Utruden, ich war Menschen und alle Tieren und viel Utruden. So schur es mir das, dass ich angemerkt habe. Und ich bin erfahren, als ich habe gegrabbelt, sie Gott weiß, wenn das irgendwas merken mit der Welt. Nö. Aber wie nicht nur der Engel im Himmel sagt, das weiß nicht, wenn der Welt was vergehen. Aber ich glaube, einmal kriegt es das, diese Menschen waren so böse, du weißt, dass Gott hat kein ab ihrem Spot, der das weiten. Wenn man nicht so denkt, dass die Welt in dieser Zeit, die wird auch so böse, du sagst, das ist so verschieden von Jahren, treibt nu manche Menschen und alles, was in der Zeitraumwelt ist, das auch bloß, was ab einmal du kommende Menschen bringen, das Fall, was du, dann sagt Gott ab einmal, nicht genug, nicht wollen eng mehr. Das war ich fertig, wenn es diese zweite Welt, was Gott ab einmal auch kriegt, so der Mensch hat, was bloß dabei ist. Hier der 8. Vers, das ist eine gute Nachricht, was das ein Mann, eine Familie. Aber Noah, wir gut alle sein beim Herrn. Die deuten nicht allen, und wir doch eine Familie Schulwesen, die haben, die deuten anders leben. Die leben am Fallen, am Nu. Das ist so wie meine Abnehmung. Ich will nicht zu lang mehr, ich will mehr von Isaak hören. Und ich will nu wieder, meine nächste Abnehmung wird von hier wieder, von Noah sein. Meine Abnehmung nächstes Modell. Mir interessiert das nochmal ein bisschen von Step zu Step überlesen. Und ich weiß, wir haben das alle aufhören gelesen, aber danach immer weiter fängt einer durch was frisch, wo einer kann überdenken. Aber das ist so weit, ich war Schluss mit meiner Opening und dann werde ich beten, dann was die Leute sein, dann was Isaac. Herr Jesus, ich danke dir noch weiter für diesen schönen Morgen, dass wir hier können taub sein. Und ich danke dir, Herr Jesus, dass wir können noch einmal dein Wort kicken. Wir können noch einmal bei den Kirchen taub kommen und lernen von deinem Wort. Herr Jesus, ich bete auch so für so, was du nicht kannst, was die kann, du wirst stark im Glauben bleiben. Herr Jesus, so bete ich auch für den Regen, was du uns noch weitergegeben hast. Ich weiß nicht, das Notz fehlt uns. Wir danken dir für das. Wir danken dir noch weiter für einen frischen Tag. Wir danken dir noch weiter für alles, was du in uns Leben getan hast. Wir danken dir, dass wir noch gesund sein und wir können wiederkommen. Herr Jesus, ich bete in Jesu Namen. Amen.
Thank you. wonderful. Na, well, Poncho, ich korrigiere ja da. Wenn mir Hospus könnt wieder in dort Timer, dort Timer interessiert mich auch sehr, von Gott Welt erschaffen haben. Und immer auch sagen, die Fahrt, wo Gott sagt, am der Leute, die haben Menschen gemerkt. Für mich ist dort der ganz schönste Fahrt in der ganzen Bibel. Ich bin vielleicht 12 Jahre alt, als ich dort mit dem ersten Mal lesen da. Du musst dich einfach still halten und sagen, God regretted making man. I was thinking, this is the saddest thing God's ever said. He actually regretted it. We have no more regrets, right? We know what it's like to regret something. That's how God felt. He felt just like that, right? I just wish, I'm wondering if I did the right thing. So that just tells you how much we are like God, right? He created Adam and Eve in his own image. Yeah, wonderful. But then the word says, but, right? Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Isn't that amazing? There was one man, one family that did not go along with the flow. Isn't that amazing? The whole world. There was only one family that did not go with the flow. That's amazing. So one time I did a wedding, and I used that as my text, but then Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And I told the new couple, I said, you can be that family that don't go with the flow. You decide. You can be that family. You can be like Noah. And the flow is very powerful. Remember Jesus said, broad is the way, right? It's very powerful. We get sucked into that. It's hard to get out. I've been there. I know what it's like. Yeah, but thank God Jesus comes and he puts an exit on this big flow, right? We can get off. That's the good news. Noah got off. He didn't stay on there. Thank you for sharing that, Poncho. That was very inspiring. I really enjoyed that. Så det var Isaak. Vi har hos kan vidare lära och det är boodschap han kan extra movreng. Så ja, kom vi nog den and vad book vi han avfang till studieren. Does anybody remember what book that we're going to be in for a while? Yes. Okay.
Song of Solomon.
Yeah, Song of Solomon. That's right. I know this was a long time ago because I know that I've been in a church where a preacher asked, what did I preach on last Sunday? And I'm like, oh, man, what was it? Yeah, so this was a long time ago, right? So I knew that was a challenging question. Song of Solomon. And the reason I'm in Song of Solomon right now is that at the beginning of last year, I needed poems and music to get me through. I'd never been in the part of my spiritual journey where I needed music and poems to get me through. But at the beginning of last year, I did. That was strange. All of a sudden, God chose music and poems, to deliver me and to inspire me and to encourage me. And then when I did, I found so much encouragement in there, one poem after another. I would open the songbook and just read the poems, just read the songs. And to my surprise, some of the most beautiful poems are actually in Old Colony Songbook. I read German. There's one song that starts off, and I wish I knew the number. I should have written it down. But in High German it says, und küsste mich mit seiner Gnade. He has kissed me with his grace. And last time in Song of Solomon, when we started there, did you notice the Song of Solomon starts off that way? That I'm looking for someone, that he would kiss me with his mouth, right? And so there we saw the kiss of grace. And all of a sudden, I stopped when I read that. I said, what does it mean for God to kiss me with his grace? And so I really got into that again. And so as we look at that, we look at Song of Solomon, and verse 2, the first thing she says is, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. So she's talking about a personal affection from God. And some cultures teach that God is far away somewhere, that if you live just right, he might notice you. But I grew up as a kid thinking God was sitting in heaven with a stick in his hand, just waiting to swat me anytime I did something wrong. I was scared. And so I've told the story often in California. Pastor Kenner, he school kids every Tuesday after school he'd teach us Bible studies, and then he had that poster there with Jesus sitting on a rock, and all the children were flocking around him. Some of the children that were sitting on his lap, and then every time he asked what song we wanted to sing, my hand always went up, right? And I would always request, the countdown song. But in that class where there were Bibles, we were teaching, and so then I learned, wait a minute, that guy on the poster, his name is Jesus, and he likes children. And, where we came from, children were to be seen or not heard. And I had an interesting concept about God. Religion made him look like, as a child, I didn't think I could ever come close to him. Here he was, Jesus in the rock, and I'm staring at this poster that he's got there on that wall. And I was drawn to that man as a child. I was drawn to him. It is just, look at verse 4 that we looked at last time. Draw me after you. Let us run. The king has brought me into his chambers. He talks about being drawn. And so God does draw us. The first time I felt drawn, I was about 5 years old. I think I was in kindergarten at that time. And so I'm going to add something to the story. I've shared this story before, but I'm going to add something I haven't added before. So some of my siblings were there too, and other children were there too. Mr. Kennan went around knocking doors and asked parents, can your children come? Not all the parents consented, but some did. Ours did, and I don't know why, but I'm glad they did. And they were there, and there was this blonde-haired girl there, probably about 9, 10 years old. I was about 5. And she was a little blonde-haired girl, full of freckles on her face. And Mr. Kenner would oftentimes offer, and he'd have Bible trivia and stuff, and he'd ask questions and stuff. You would win prizes. Sometimes you get a pencil, and sometimes an eraser, and things like that. Well, I'm sitting there thinking, that girl over there, she's really happy, and she'd always raise her hands, and he'd have a question, and she'd win these prizes. And I was kind of jealous over this blonde-haired, freckled girl that was in that class. And that little girl's name was Ann Peters. Do you remember that? There you go. Yeah. I remember that so well. We were all blonde and freckled in California. Our hair was all bleached. We were always out in the sun, right? And it was just, that's something I remember. So I thought, well, my siblings were there too, and she vaguely remembers. So I thought, well, here's a memory. but yeah, I just remember my experience that time was the first time I was drawn to God. That I had this concept of that Jesus is friendly towards mankind, and I just remember the drawing that happened there. And well, don't worry, I'm not going to sing that song here. But I've taught it to my grandchildren. Emily just really sings that song at the countdown. I've told the story to Susie so often now that she's taught it to her class, and so they sing it. It has a little new twist to it. They start with 10, 9, then down to 1, then it's a blast off, and then he starts saying, "Somewhere in outer space, God has prepared a place." Yeah, and I was just drawn. So yeah, the countdown song. So you can Google it. It's called the countdown song. It's a children's version, and it's all there. And that's a song we would sing. So yeah, about the drawing. So we looked at last time about how we were drawn, right? How she comes and how she's so unsatisfied with her life. This relationship we're talking about here. And as we look over here today, so last time we looked at the affection of the kiss of his mouth, the kiss of grace. Today we're going to look at his arms of grace. And when we think about the embrace, right? The arms of grace. And the arms of grace is something very personal. Every person that has come to God has experienced this, right? It's that symbol of acceptance. Once we've experienced the embrace of God, the arms of grace, then we know we've been accepted. It doesn't matter what age, even the children. It says, in Luke it says, he took the infants and held them in his arms. He actually held it says infants, or a baby. Yeah, you would hold, how would you hold an infant, right? That actually uses the word infant. He held babies in his arms. They were all welcome. He blessed them. He's wanting to bless them. And so we did go through verse 8. And so today we're going to go from verse 9 in chapter 1. And then I want to finish chapter 1 and chapter 2. And so basically we're going to look at the king's table. And we're going to talk about the God of the mountain. So today this Shulamite woman is going to lead us to the God of the mountain. In Song of Solomon here in chapter 1. And so we're going to look at verse 9. All right, so this verse, it already starts off funny. So poems always use complementary comparisons, but it's a compliment. All right, I'm going to try to find what does this mean, right? So I see some smiles already. So look at verse 9. It says, I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Whoa, you remind me of one of my horses, says the king. And he's talking to her. He's talking to this beautiful woman, the Shulamite woman. And he she reminds him of one of his horses. And so as we look at that, and we look at, she's complimenting. Poncho just said something about horses. Do you remember what he said? And I thought that's interesting. I'm going to talk about horses today a little bit. Did anybody get it, what he said about van zijn pied? Had dit ging te leer. Isn't that amazing? That's what he means. He said, you're such a beautiful woman. You've been so teachable. Just look at you. Just look at you. You're beautiful. A trained horse, and he's teachable. He's usable. So today I would say like a comparison today would be horses were used for everything back then, right? They didn't have cars, so horses were used for everything. For wars, for plowing, for riding, just everything. The horse was everything back then. And Solomon had some of the finest horses out of Egypt. And so he says, you remind me, you're so teachable. So if there were two horses for sale, one was broken in and one was not, which one would you rather have? Second question, which one would you rather get on and ride? There it is. She's trustworthy. A broken-in horse that's trained is usable. It's the same as saying that a car that's not working is just not very usable. But a car that is working is very usable. You can do stuff with it, right? What he's saying is, I can use you in my kingdom. You are ready. Now, it's not so bad, right, this compliment. And so once we understand what it means, what this poem means by all this, you remind me of one of our horses, right? So at first when you read it, you're like, what? So also there's a verse, the Song of Solomon. We're going to get to that yet, but I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. He says, your nose is like a tower. You're like, what? Like a tower? Whoa, that's one big nose. But he uses that metaphor, right? So what does it mean when he compliments her and says your nose is like a tower? Well, what it meant was when you use the word tower, the cities had fences around them, and the corner of the walls had towers, and those were the watchtowers, and they were higher. So soldiers would stand higher, and they had a lookout over the country, and they were guarding the city. So what he's saying is this, your nose is like a tower. You have discernment. Have you ever heard the term, something smells fishy? The nose. So once we understand poetry and how it works, it's actually a compliment. So yeah, hey, if my nose looks like a tower, great, right, I have discernment. I can smell things out. If something ain't right, I can smell it. And the nose is very amazing, right? It can smell things out. So what I want to say about the compliment is, about the way the poem works, is that I think the main ingredient in encouraging someone, the main ingredient in encouragement is compliment. I don't think anybody can encourage me without a compliment. If not, that would be rather discouraging, would it not? But think about it. So the main ingredient in encouraging someone, there's more ingredients, but the main one is compliment. And sometimes we have gifts and we have compliments that we ourselves are not even aware of. And when someone brings that out, you're like, oh, well, I didn't know that, but you compliment. So talking about compliment, it can come from different kinds of people. So I want to share a little story here, and I have permission, by the way. I don't like sharing stories about people. Now what I shared about my sister Anne, I didn't get permission for that. I'll just have to say sorry later. Yeah. So, but that's our story, right? We can share our story. And so Anne was part of my story. So were my other siblings. I was the youngest there. Speaking about my brother John, at that time, he would have been 1 year old. Me and him are 5 years apart. So he'd been a little baby at home at this time. And that's what's such a shock to our family when we found out 2 weeks ago that he ended up in ICU for a week, and had 6 blood transfusions. And the doctors couldn't figure out how he walked in alive. He had 1 unit of blood left. And all of a sudden he was just weak. He couldn't take another step. But he still walked in the emergency room. So yeah, that's our family story. So when I think about my story is that I was really encouraged in 2021 when a young little lady, cute little lady at that, she's about 9 years old, and while I was preaching, she had written a little letter, and after church, she brought it to me. And it just, and I have it right here. I keep all the notes that I get from children. And I put them in my files at home. I keep everything. So also the students in my wife's class, she does 3rd and 4th grade, they often send notes home with a cookie or something from Mr. Peters. And so oftentimes while I'm eating the cookie, she's videotaping me and how I'm loving it, and then she sends it to the child's mom. And then, but their notes that they give me, I always put in a file. I keep them. Ever so often, I go through my file. And I did this a while back, and this note came up. And it's a smile came across my face. And I remembered it so clearly. She gave it to me. And so yesterday, I showed this note to Elma, and I asked her if I had her permission to share the story here today. Yeah, and she consented. And so, yeah, that's beautiful. And so I like to say, so she says, that was the best message I ever heard. Thank you very much. You know, a compliment like that, I don't want to stop preaching. That's something. God sends His angels in His own way and uses even children to encourage you. A while back, I had an interesting experience about complimenting. So my grandson is 1.5 years right now and really attached to me. When they come to church, he screams for me. They have to bring him to me, right? He sits on my lap. So I was babysitting Emily and Owen, and Emily, she's almost 5 years old. She talks she's very, very with the program. Her vocabulary is quite rich already. And so we were talking about, so I was babysitting them, and I told her mom I'd have them home by 5 o'clock, so they'd be home when Danny gets home from work. And I said, all right, hey, I'm going to take you guys home. You know, they're our neighbors, actually. So we get on the golf cart. And, well, they didn't want to go home, as usual. And I said, Emily, don't you want to meet your dad when he comes home? And she said, well, not really. I said, really? I think you should meet him when he comes home. My children always met me at the door when I came home, and I loved it. And then she said, yeah, besides Owen, he likes you better than he likes Dad. I said, really? So you're saying, Owen, your brother likes me better than his own father. And so we had that kind of conversation. And so she meant to compliment me, but I countered the compliment by saying how wonderful their dad was. And I won the argument. So the compliment, right? The encouragement. And so that's how that works. And so, and I knew that Owen right now likes me better because I let him get away with everything. I spoil him. It's ice cream, it's candy, it's lollipops all day long when they're with me. His dad don't let him have all that. For now, he likes me better, right? But at home, yeah, I don't, yeah. And I know how this works. So yeah, the idea about complimenting me, the encouragement. So Solomon is encouraging her by comparing her to a horse. But it's a good compliment. And the spiritual meaning is like, I was talking to a man a while back, and he really had a tough journey, and he was back now wanting to serve the Lord. And I told him, this is what I heard that one of the teachers said at Bible school. God cannot use a broken man, but He can use a broken, healed man. Remember Job and his brokenness? He was so full of bitterness, right? But once he was healed, he got restored, and everything was restored. He became very usable again. And so, but God can use a broken, healed man. And so, and that's the idea of the horse here. So I thought I would start with that, but the idea of complimenting him. So the compliments continue. So I'm going to continue reading right now. So I spent kind of a lot of time about the idea of complimenting, the idea of encouraging, right? And that's what's happening in this relationship. The twofold relationship is about complimenting each other. So often my wife comes to me and really compliments me on something I do well. Well, thank you. But I come back and I compliment her what I think she does so well. So when I babysit my 2 kids for only half a day, I'm so tired, you're not going to get nothing else out of me the rest of the day. She comes home and I tell her, you have 20 students in your class. 2 of them are handicapped, right? And I tell her, I don't know how you do it. I really don't. I have 2 kids for half a day, and I'm done. And So it's that idea of compliment. You really appreciate someone for who they are and for what they do. That's very much needed. So I'd like to tell a fictional short story here yet, and it's just made up. So this isn't a real person. So basically, in my mind, there are two men they are visiting. One man, his name is Narcissus. Another man's name, his name is Mr. Optimus. Who do you think is doing all the talking? Mr. Narcissus does all the talking. Well, Mr. Optimus, he never gets a word in. Mr. Narcissus is so busy talking about himself. Mr. Optimus never gets a word in. So the people are gathered around, and they've known Mr. Optimus for always complimenting people. He's always optimist. He always finds a silver lining in the clouds, no matter how bad the situation. So they are waiting already to see. Now, they're saying for sure Mr. Optimus is not going to find a compliment from Mr. Narcissus. Finally, after a long time, Mr. Narcissus has talked about himself, and then he's done. He just walks off. Now they're all wondering, what kind of compliment is Mr. Optimus going to have from Mr. Narcissus? And he looks at the people looking at him, and finally he shrugs his shoulder and he says, well, at least he didn't talk about other people. True. That was a compliment. See, the optimist always finds a compliment. That is true. That was still, what Mr. Narcissus did was still better than if he'd have talked about other people. Yeah, found a compliment. And so that's why I say these fictional stories, you can kind of make them up to fit the lesson, right? But that's how it works. And so I know sometimes I get in that narcissist mood, and all of a sudden I lost track of time, and I'm thinking, woo, I just talked about myself for a whole hour. Time to stop. Let someone else talk. So yeah, the idea of compliment, it's just worth so much. And so when we think about, as we read now a little further, let's continue now. So we looked at the horse thing, and I really wanted to use that as an example of compliment. So, verse 10, your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. We will make for you ornaments of gold, studded with silver. While the king was on his couch, or table we could say, my nard gave forth its fragrance. My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh that lies between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of hemel blossoms in vineyard of En-gedi. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. Behold, you are beautiful, my beloved, truly delighted. Our couch is green, the beams of our house are cedar, our rafters are pine. Now I'm reading out of the ESV translation. There's some areas where the King James has a little better interpretation, kind of like verse 12. It says, well, the king was sitting on his couch. Now, the reason table is a little different in the Middle East is they don't use table and chairs like we do, right? Many of our young people have gone to Iraq to serve over there in the refugee camps, and they're finding that what the Arabs do over there is their living room, all of a sudden the furniture gets all put to the edge, and they roll out a plastic, so the floor becomes the table, right? It's a flat. And so when the Bible uses the word table, mesa, it means a flat piece of land, right? A tableland, if you will. So in Psalm 23, he talks about thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. So that means a place of flat land, plenty to eat, and so forth. So the table always is a representation of food and fellowship. So back over here, when we look to verse 10, the interpretation here is that the beautiful part of a person is the cheeks, right? He says your natural beauty, and he brings out the cheeks, and he talks about the ornaments, right? Have you noticed he also talks about the neck? So the cheeks is a symbol of beauty in a person, right? But you know what the neck symbolizes? Our will. Did you notice that what God called the people in the desert, stiff-necked, rebellious people? It's always a stiff neck. But he looks at her and he sees a bendable neck. It's not stiff. Yeah, he says your neck is beautiful, right? And he talks about the neck. He says that your neck with strings of jewels. That the king actually says, you know what? I've got a necklace for you. Your neck deserves it. Your will is bendable. You're not a stubborn, stiff-necked person. And And so it talks about the neck, right? And it's a compliment. She's being complimented here as this beautiful person. And look at verse 11. We will make you, have you noticed the word is now we? So we see a sense of the Trinity here. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, right? They have now agreed that we will make you the ornaments. The ornaments of what? We just talked about, her cheeks, the rows of jewels, talks about the neck, right? And so they're saying, we're going to make you ornaments, actually, to beautify you. And what is the gold a symbol of? In the scripture, gold always symbolizes eternal life. It is something that lasts forever, right? And then we look at the studded silver. The word silver always points to redemption. Based on redemption, based on salvation, you have received eternal life. So we're going to make you ornaments of gold. These jewels, I'm going to beautify you with salvation. That's what's so unique about all this language here. And then by the time now in 12, we have about he's at the table, right? Have you noticed what she says? My nard gives forth its fragrance. So we're going to come back and look at that. Let's look at the 13 says, my beloved is to me a satin, the myrrh that lies between my breasts. Now when the Bible talks about the breast, it always talks about the feelings of the heart. It's always the idea of heart, right? So in public school, I remember when we did the Pledge of Allegiance, we always had to put our hand where? On our heart. You know what that meant? I mean what I say. I'm pledging with my heart. So when she talks about, it's that, when she talks about exactly that, he lies between my breasts. It's like this, at night I can't stop thinking about him. He's always in my heart. They're just really close, these two. And talks about the spices of 14, the clusters and the blossoms. There's a new life happening here. 13, it talks about, behold, again, he's complimenting her how beautiful she is. And then he says something interesting. Talks about her eyes. What does a dove remind you of? Remember what Jesus said? Be wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. When Jesus was baptized, who showed up? The dove. He says, your eyes are pure. There's no evil. They're clean. So he's telling how pure, how beautiful she is, and likens them to doves. And it talks about, in verse 16, it talks about how their bed or the couch is green. Green is a symbol of peace, and the bed, the couch, is always a symbol of resting. So she's able to rest now in peace, right? The color is green. And it talks about the beams of the house that they're living in, or the room that they're in. It talks about the kind of wood that it is. And if you look this up, when Solomon, this is Solomon speaking here, when he built the temple, he used two kinds of wood, and you find out it's these two woods. So where the Lord's dwelling is where these woods are found. So it's just, what it means is that, the house of salvation, it's made of this wood. So I would like to continue here, and then I'm going to point out a couple of things today as we that we can get out of here. So now chapter 2, I'm just going to read the whole chapter, and then we can come back and just kind of talk it over. And so it says, or I'll do one verse at a time. It says, I am the rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. Remember the song, He's a lily of the valleys? That's where it comes from, this poem. And